Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good.
Trying to figure out. Where I'm looking. We can reflect our customer base or our patient base. That can help us more effectively meet their needs and effectively serve different groups. It also helps our company reputation, whether it's a positive image in the public or being, corporate, good corporate sponsors and being socially responsible. And then the bottom line is that profitability and innovation and growth come with having a diverse, a commitment to diversity. So what can we do about it? We can actually do a lot. So the first thing we can do is recognize our biases. And then we can use holistic recruiting practices, and then we can work within our existing systems to drive change. And yes, this is a big university and there's lots of rules and there's lots of things that we have to follow, but we can still work within those systems to make a difference. So we're going to talk first about our biases. So we all have them. It's okay. They range from thinking about somebody as far as just your first impression, or but it also, like, your implicit biases also help you survive in the world. So it's okay to have them. We all do. But they can influence our thinking, and then they can lead to discrimination. So when you have implicit biases, you don't actually know that you have them. And so you might not intend to be discriminatory, but that might be your impact, right? So it doesn't matter that you have good intentions, it matters what you actually do. But if you can know what your biases are and make them explicit, you can manage them better. So a few of the common implicit biases include like introversion or extroversion. Do you have a preference for people who are introverted or extroverted based on how you are? Do you have a preference for people who are competent or warm, or you just get a good feeling about them, or maybe they have some unique mannerisms that get on your nerves, right? So those are some implicit biases that we all might have. So Harvard has created a series of implicit association tests that measure everything from racial preferences to age and career-oriented biases. So taking a few of these can be very eye-opening in general. So I highly recommend that, and we will send you these materials so you can have the links. So how you can mitigate your biases. So we have to be willing to explore and acknowledge that we're not robots, right? We're human. So just acknowledging that you have these in the first place is a good first step. And then developing the capacity to look inward, being self-aware, and practicing constructive uncertainty. So questioning your perceptions and your assumptions, right? And then exploring awkwardness and discomfort. So, and engaging with people who are different than you, right? So sometimes people in places or situations feel uncomfortable to us, but that's only because we've never been exposed to them, right? So it's always an interesting experience to ask questions of people who don't look like you or don't think like you, who come from a much different background than you, and just kind of have conversations with those folks on a one-on-one basis and get their perspective on their life. And then you can ask for feedback from those folks and then act on it. So we do have a number of trainings available around bias and DEI and belonging. So there are some online trainings available through the University of New Mexico. The AAMC has a couple of different ones, and there's one specifically on doing interviews on Zoom. And then we have curated some LinkedIn learning classes that are helpful with, inclusivity and cultural humility. So the next thing we can do is look at our recruiting practices and engage in holistic recruiting. So the AAMC defines holistic review, and they started this as a way to look at medical students and for hiring medical or for choosing medical students for schools. And what they realized is that they were looking at tests, like at their test scores, their MCATs and their GPAs in college and how many clubs they were in and that kind of stuff. And they realized that that wasn't getting them a diverse group of people. So this originally started with medical students, but we have expanded its reach into hiring practices. So it's a flexible, individualized way of looking at a person's experiences, attributes, competencies, and metrics, which could be your scores or your grades or whatever, when considering how the individual might contribute value. So in holistic selection and advancement, so promotion processes, the criteria are broad-based and then linked to the goals, and they promote diversity as an essential element to achieving excellence. So it's important to balance these attributes, experiences, attributes, competencies, and metrics when you are assessing with the intent of creating a diverse applicant pool. And then you need to apply them to everybody equitably across the applicant pool. And then it needs to be grounded in data, right? So when we're making selection criteria, we need to create that, and then we need to follow that. So committees who give individualized consideration to how each candidate may contribute to the institution, weighing and balancing the criteria will achieve the outcomes desired, right? So the AAMC has quite a bit of information on their website about this. There's a whole workshop that you can run. They have a bunch of different materials on their website, and they've published a couple of studies. So one of the things that they recommend is using an equitable hiring tool, and I'm going to go over what that could entail, and then we will have it posted in our recruiting and retention resources on the intranet. So the first thing is a diverse and informed search committee, and then job description review, making sure that's a thorough process, how you approach your recruiting and advertising, what kind of interview questions you use, and then what your selection criteria are. So those are the 5 kind of components. So first things first, it's important to review the relevant demographic information, right? So what kind of what do you have going on in your department? Looking at the university's equitable workforce plan, which is the affirmative action plan, looking at those demographics, making sure that you're, kind of knowing what your baseline is in your department. And then identifying a diverse search committee. So does your panel include gender diversity? Is there racial diversity? Is there organizational diversity? And then we recommend designating an equity champion. So if you have an equity champion on your search committee, they can be designated to call out when they see bias happening or when they see something not going quite right, or like if you ask one candidate 3 questions and you only ask the second, you ask the next candidate only 2 of the questions, stuff like that, so that you can keep it equitable and fair across the selection process. We also recommend on the search committees that you have everyone take, everyone is supposed to have taken the search committee training, and then we recommend that you have them take implicit bias trainings as well. So then job description review. So the first thing that they recommend that you look at is transferable skills. So if you're hiring, a supervisor to oversee, a group of people, maybe they haven't worked in a specific university environment before, but maybe they've supervised folks. So it might be okay, right? So if they have similar experience, even if it's in a different industry, that that can be worked out. Educational requirements. So what are the minimum educational requirements? Do they actually need a college degree to do this job? Can experience be substituted? And if there are educational requirements, what are those unintended consequences, right? And how can you mitigate that? I mean, if they're a doctor, they need to be a doctor, right? So their education and their experience do matter. They need to have gone to an accredited medical school, and they need to have gone to an accredited, they need to have graduated from a residency program. But a lot of other positions, there's a lot of other people out there that you can be a little bit more open-minded about. So experience requirements, what are the minimum experience recs? What might be the potential unintended consequences caused by those, and can you mitigate them? And then minimum quals, when you're setting those based on those listed skills, education, and experience, what really are they? And could any of those be learned on the job? And if they could be learned on the job, then those should be a preferred qualification. And Lindsay Fouquet from Campus HR has done a good job about talking about this, and her TAC consultants have been pretty good over the last year or two, kind of pushing back on min quals and making sure that those really are the minimum qualifications, and trying to be a little bit more inclusive. So then when it comes to recruiting and advertising. So sometimes we have preferred candidates in mind, right? And that often can deprive you of the possibility of finding someone even better. So if you're not posting it externally, ask yourself why you're doing that. What's the rationale, and does it minimize negative impacts and unintended consequences, or does it just make it easier for you and everyone else to get it done with a 5-day posting? So if posting the job is leading to unintended consequences or unintended outcomes for groups that are already underrepresented, it's really important that you at least talk through that and decide that you are going to go down that path. And then advertising. So if you're running an external ad, and you're posting it on, posting it on a diversity site or Indeed, and you're paying for it, or Andrew Hudson or ZipRecruiter or whatever, you can run your external ad through the gender decoder before you post it. And it's really important to think about how you want to target outreach to underrepresented groups. So we use Circa now, so it does post to a number of diversity websites just automatically. But if you're actually looking to expand your horizons and look for people who are underrepresented in medicine, you can use Job Elephant, which is a paid service. Lindsay's talked about that before, but they can do some targeted recruiting for you. So some best practices for the search committees. I did talk about this already. So make sure everybody takes the search committee training. When I was in charge of divvying out the applications for some positions in family medicine, if they hadn't taken the training, I wouldn't give them access to Taleo, and I wouldn't give them out the resumes until I made sure everybody on the search committee had taken the training. We also required that everybody had completed some kind of implicit bias training in the last 2 years. So those are the one from New Mexico, the AMC training, or some implicit association tests from Harvard. And then having somebody serve as the equity champion who can speak up when they see bias creeping in is important. And then I think this is the one that we have a pretty good opportunity on. So the best practice is to immediately evaluate candidates immediately following the interview by each committee member, not actually as a group. And you should all be using a common rubric. That if you, we tend to hang on after the interview and talk about the candidate, right? But that can invite groupthink. So people who like the candidate are like, woo, let's hire them. And then some of them who might not be thrilled might end up keeping their mouths shut and not saying anything, right? And then maybe so then they just go along, right? So that's a pretty good opportunity, I think, that we have. And then once all the candidates have been interviewed, you evaluate as a committee based on the data and then make a recommendation to move the candidates forward. And then interview questions. So it's important for them to be structured and behavioral based and relevant to the position. Don't go off script, right? You can ask follow-up or probing questions, but it's really important that we stick to the list and that we're treating every candidate the same. Even if you are, 3 questions in and the candidate is, not going to be the right person for the position, you can't just call the interview early and say, yeah, we're just going to wrap this up early, right? Like you need to ask them all the questions. You need to do the same thing for each candidate. It's important to decide what is important to your department. So is it, what attributes are you looking for? Are you looking for teamwork or self-awareness or integrity or initiative? So it's important to know ahead of time what those things are so that you can develop interview questions around that. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So it's really important to keep it professional and know it's important in your department to be successful. And then we recommend having a DEI question in every interview. And you can also make it via a prompt or a screening question on the application. So you can also ask a question there that the applicants have to respond to. So we have some sample questions that are based on different things. So you can, you obviously want to ask about their experience. That's the first number question there. Like, tell us why you want this position and what do you think would be a good fit. But then you can also look for position specific competencies, but you can also look for teamwork or self-awareness or problem solving. So we have a list on the intranet of questions by attributes. And then we also have lists of questions by skill and questions by job. So on the recruiting and retention tile on the SOM HR intranet, there are a number of sets of questions there that you can feel free to use. But they're almost all behavioral based and get at certain things. And then we also have some DEI based questions. So how has diversity, equity, and inclusion played a part in your career? Hopefully we're all asking something like that, either on the application or in the interviews. I like some of these other ones even better because it gives them an opportunity to talk about their experiences. So like discuss how you've effectively communicated across diverse groups and disciplines. We know in higher ed and at the School of Medicine, right, sometimes you're hiring for positions who are going to deal with staff and they're going to deal with MAs, they're going to deal with hospital people, they're going to deal with patients, they're going to deal with, upper level faculty. So I like that fourth one there. I think probably the best. And then it's important to have think about bias interrupters. So and this came from the Work-Life Law Center, and they have a whole toolkit. It's called Bias Interrupters Toolkit. And so when you're selecting your candidate, make sure that again in advance what the factors are that are important for the job. Making sure that you're giving each candidate a ranking. We shouldn't just be hiring friends of friends unless your networks are really diverse. They recommend considering candidates for multi-tier schools, not just elite institutions, and then treating everybody the same. So give everybody or nobody the benefit of the doubt. Don't insist on likability or some other factor from some of your candidates, but not others. Don't make assumptions about what parents want or are able to do if they have, if there's a gap in their resume because they were taking care of their kids. That doesn't mean that they are not, ready to come back to work full time, and we shouldn't be making assumptions about that. And then we shouldn't be commenting or evaluating for culture or fit or executive presence or other vague concepts. So I think we talk a lot about they wouldn't fit in, I don't think that this is the right fit for the candidate. That's not a good reason. Like, are they not, do they not meet the, preferred qualifications of the job? Do they not have, the people skills to be successful in the role? Do they not have the technical skills to be successful in the role? Like, what is it? What behaviors are they displaying, or what skills are they lacking? Rather than, because fit implies that you just like them, either like them or you don't like them. So and if we are hiring people that we like, then we're hiring more people like us. So it's important to keep those vague kind of concepts out of the selection process. So we can drive change even within the giant institution in which we work. It's okay to start small. So I think these are the path that we followed in family medicine in order to kind of get our initiatives going. So the first thing we did was start with leadership support. You really need to gauge your executive support for initiatives like this. This is a growing movement. So there are at least 10 people across the School of Medicine that have stipends for doing DEI work. But there are a large number of DEI champions across the school that are not getting stipends. And you don't need to be in a leadership role to be a DEI champion. So make sure that you have some backing. And then assessing your current state, right? We need to start with what we can do, right? But we need to start with where we're at, right? So what other data points can you get? The faculty culture survey results have been distributed to the chairs. Maybe you do an internal opinion survey or something like that within your department. So what other data points can you get? So you need to kind of know where you're starting so you know where you want to go. And then fostering an inclusive culture. So employee affinity groups are a nice thing to offer for folks to be able to talk to other folks that are like them or who are feeling maybe left out, or they're not fitting in necessarily with the rest of the department. The Office of DEI and Community Engagement offers community circles, and those are happening multiple times a week for folks across the campus to join in. Making sure that you have inclusive policies, and then maybe looking at doing some cultural celebrations, that kind of thing within your department. So we have a sample opinion survey questions on the internet under the recruiting and retention resources. But I would just like to ask before I get to the training stuff, because there's quite a bit of information there, but what are some things that you've done to foster inclusivity in your department? Let me put that in the chat.
And we do see the questions that are there too. We'll get to those in a little bit once we get to this portion as well.
So yeah, so what have you done to foster inclusivity or belonging in your department? So in the dean's office, we have potlucks. We have a chili cook-off. We have not last year, but the year before that, we did a door decorating contest during the holidays. So what kinds of things can you do?
So we have Oscar saying team collaboration and listen to all ideas to work towards shared goals.
That's awesome. I think it's important to invite dissent, right? So if you're working through a problem, it's important to have those different voices in there and listening to all the ideas. Anybody else? No?
We have one from Kim. Sometimes she likes to add a "did you know" for holidays. In a month such as Juneteenth, lots of people haven't been taught that history.
Nice. I like that. I think another thing that you can do is when you're planning events or something, making sure that you check like holiday calendars to make sure that you're not scheduling your event over the top of a religious holiday that you might not be aware of. I've made that mistake a couple of times, not checking the calendar.
We have a couple more entries. In paid surgery, the admin team includes different stakeholders and meals. Katie said quarterly community building events and regular updates on changes, etc. Through a large Teams channel, so all are aware of the updates. Carissa also added professional development events for research professionals to build a sense of community within that group.
Yeah, that's a good example of an affinity group. There's a clinical research group that meets quarterly, I think, that they can get together, the RSPs can get together and talk about their different issues. So I think that's really important. Thank you for that. And then you can provide training. There's so much training available on this campus around this topic. So the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement, that's Regina Richards' office. They have a number of programs. The one that I'm a huge fan of is the HEAL certificate. So it's Health Equity in Action Learning certificate. And so they offer, I think it's 4 classes. My tutor just finished taking it. I think it's 4 classes that they offer. I think most of them are in person, but they have some or on Zoom, but they have some electronic ones as well. But you can get a certificate in that. That's been around for a couple of years. It was originally put on in conjunction with the downtown campus, but Regina has taken that on under her group. It's a really good primer on DEI issues and how you can be an ally and how you can just kind of what those issues are and what that can look like to be an upstander. The Office of Equity also offers a variety of trainings. They are happy to come out and talk to your group. And then there's a search advocacy resource toolkit. So the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement were originally they did a partnership with the School of Public Health, and they developed this search advocacy training. They don't have any current trainings planned, but they did put all of their resources out there for you. So when we were talking about having an equity champion on each search committee, that's what that is about. So it'll provide resources for the person or people that you want to train to be those equity champions, whether it's you or somebody else. And I actually recommend that it's not the HR people, because if you're involved in a search, you're already really just trying to corral the search committee and make sure that they're all asking the right questions and that kind of thing. So if you can have somebody else on the search committee be that equity champion, that's ideal. So now what? I would like for you guys to take us a second and just think about what has resonated with you. And then in the chat, what can you do? What can you commit to do to move DEI forward within your sphere of influence?
So we get one added. Katie said what resonated with her is equity champion, and then follow up. How do you see that supporting possibly resume review processes? Ashley put DEI questions in every interview. Oscar said to be diligent in adopting a sense of self-awareness and really embody what it means to be inclusive to others. It can't just be writing on the wall. Avery added, commit to ensuring that search committees are knowledgeable and diverse because they request new recruitments through me. And Nalia also added the resume review process and DEI questions.
Nice. Katie, did you have what did you want to come off mute? What did you mean about
Yeah, so
supporting-
we're still working internally on our resume review process particularly. And I'm curious what is a good practice from a DEI lens. You know, when you have one of the things we're also working on is the composition of our committees and making sure they're not all homogenous to a specific team. And so I'm curious how an equity champion might be able to help support putting, you know, a second or third set of eyes during the resume review and mid-qual process, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, so I think I actually think the applicant tracking matrix is actually pretty helpful if you fill it out correctly, right? So if you first you evaluate against the minimum qualifications, and then you can evaluate against your preferred qualifications. So I think it kind of comes back to what's actually needed by the job and creating those job descriptions effectively so that you can look at you can compare your resumes to that matrix. And then that gives you, it'll calculate it for you. Like, this person has 3 preferred, this person has 2 preferred, this person has 1 preferred. And if you have objective criteria, then the spreadsheet will do it for you, right? And then you know that you have kind of an equitable starting point. And then once you give those resumes out to the committee of, once you make your cutoff selections, then I think, again, asking them to review it against the qualifications, and then having them, sometimes you can just have them articulate when you have the applicant review meeting, like, what is it about this person that, why are you advocating that we go ahead and interview this person? And if they can't articulate that, then, what are you doing?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Jean also added interviews for faculty are managed by our divisions and sections. It will be challenging to implement some of the best practices and monitor them. We need to think creatively about how we can do so.
Yes, it is a challenge. This is not easy work, or we would all be doing it already, for sure. I think if you can get somebody to be the equity champion within each of your areas, they can help you, kind of monitor that a little bit. It's easier when it's a smaller department, for sure, and you have a smaller group of people, or like, if you have somebody just doing recruiting, they can kind of control the flow.
Nellie also added commit to completing the trainings at Skillsoft for hiring committees.
Yes. That would be
and then
great.
we do have a question from Michelle. How do you recommend choosing the cutoff selections? I average the preferred qual scores and choose the top grouping for interviews.
I think that's reasonable as long as you're doing it the same way for everyone. Right. So if you decide that your cutoff is going to be 2 preferred quals, out of 5 or 3, then you need to interview everybody that, if it's 3 out of 5, then everybody that gets 3 or 4 or 5 out of 5 needs to be interviewed. As long as you're being, as long as you're treating everybody the same, as long as you're administering it the same across recruitments, then that's what's important.
Ashley has a question. I noticed a lot of new resume templates included candidate photos, and some CVs contained marital status. Is there any suggestions on how to handle this through the search process?
I wish people wouldn't do that. I really wish people wouldn't do that. I don't think there's anything you can do about it, but except for ignore it, right? When I worked at the Humane Society, I would get people putting pictures of their cats and dogs on their resumes. I can't make this up. And they would write me cover letters from their animals about how I should hire their pet parent. And those were the people that I immediately put in the volunteer pile instead of the employee pile, because I could deal with them 3 hours a week, but probably not 40 hours a week. I think you just have to ignore the information that is provided to you that you should not have. I feel like the marital status thing is fading out as the population that is coming into the workforce is younger, and they are hopefully taught better. So hopefully some of that's fading out. I don't know what you can do about pictures, because that's just a bad idea to have those in general, but.
We did have a couple of questions that popped up earlier. That'll probably be a good time to answer now.
Okay, sure. Yep.
So the first one is from Jean. So she says current university and SOM practice for evaluating years of relevant experience and only counting experience post-bachelor's degree can run counter to assessing transferable skills. How do you reconcile this?
Well, that sounds like a question for you,
It
Brendan.
does sound like a question, but yeah, it does. So Jean, are you talking about just when you review the resume, how are we able to accurately review like their assessments, even if it's experience we probably wouldn't count?
Yeah, I mean, when we're evaluating resumes, there are strong arguments sometimes from our search committee that this candidate has the experience, although it does not directly relevant to this position. They used all kinds of skills and ability or skills that they gained in that role that are applicable to this role, but because it either was prior to obtaining a bachelor's degree or because it's not directly relevant, even if they're considering it in evaluating the candidate, it's never counted when you're looking at salary offers and things like that.
So for that one, I think that would be worth having a discussion with myself and then the central HR comp team as well. I've seen some where, depending on the role they're doing, it might be something we can count. If it's student assistant work that they're doing to get their bachelor's degree, that isn't something we would count because that work is going towards getting their bachelor's and they're getting the 4 TQS points for doing that work. If it's something completely outside of like a student grad work, like they're a scribe, there's some other side things I've seen for like clinical sciences, we can look at that job and see if the skills that they're doing, if it's fully relevant with that role. There are times when we can count it, but with those are more on a case-by-case basis. As for how central HR comp would review those, I need to check with them to see if they have that same philosophy or if there's other things they look at when they're considering that type of work as well.
Brendan, in that same situation that Jean was just describing, I've also had to repost because we found a candidate that they wouldn't allow us to count their experience. And then I had to repost it for them to reapply because of the rank that they wanted at entry level as opposed to intermediate. And it doesn't bode well with the candidates when we say we really want to hire you, but please jump through all of these other hoops because it's just rough.
Yeah, for those ones, I always recommend just always doing an open rank entry to senior, just because then what the search committee might be seeing as like they think this is relevant work, it's a senior role, and then when it comes over to me to review it, and what they're counting as relevant is just student assistant work that they were doing as their bachelor's. Since it's open rank, we can easily just move it down to entry and tell them we really like you, we love this experience you have, we want to bring you in at entry. And then there's always a discussion that's worth having too about career growth. Because when you start as an entry or an intermediate, there's a lot more room to grow into their career within this one position than instead of starting them at a senior, they're kind of already stuck at that senior role and it's not overinflating maybe some of the experience they have. That's what's on that resume. And then I think we did have a couple more questions. One of them was just if these slides will be sent out after this meeting.
Yes,
yes, they will. One was, can you provide a list of where the university jobs post to? Makidra added those 2 attachments as well. Thank you, Makidra. And we could also include that with the email we send out to show where those job postings go to.
And then I see one about how do you confirm that people have completed these trainings? So you can run a training report out of HCM for the Skillsoft training. The implicit bias tests and the those other implicit bias trainings, yeah, they would just have to tell you. There's not like a little certificate or anything that you get. But the Skillsoft search committee training, you can run a report out of HCM about that.
And I think we had another question pop up. We've had discussions regarding blinding resumes. That does not seem feasible. What is your stance?
So blinding resumes actually, I think takes away some of what you might be wanting to do, right? So if you don't know the name of somebody on the, if you don't know their name or where they're from or whatever on the resume, if you take that information out, then you're potentially limiting people. So like, or eliminating people based on, like maybe you want to be more inclusive. Maybe you're looking for somebody who is, racially diverse for a particular role. Not, just in general, you're trying to expand your applicant pool. I think blinding the resumes takes that away. It's also not feasible with the way that we are able to get the information out of Taleo. So it's a tactic. I know, I mean, that's just my personal opinion, is blinding resumes isn't the best way to go about it.
Looks like those are all the questions in the chat.
Okay, so we will send out these slides, and there's resources here, all of the different policies, the different offices that have to do with this, and then our tile on our recruiting and retention resources page. And then these are just some sources with some additional articles that you might want to take a look at. So thank you very much for coming. Next month, we will see you in person. We're going to do some scenarios in HR land. We will have lunch. So please make sure that you RSVP to the appointment. If you're going to be there, we'll have lunch. This starts at 1. We'll have lunch starting at 12:15. And it's at the Nighthorse Campbell building. So hopefully we will see you there. And if you have some scenarios that come up in the next couple of weeks, please send those to SOM HR so that we can include those in the What Would You Do session. And then in October, we'll have credentialing. And then November will be employment law and some best practices for termination. We'll have Brad Mather's group out to do that in November. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Deanna.
Any last minute questions?
I don't think so.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. See you guys later.